And welcome everybody, tweeting it out. We have a lot to talk about 49ers wise today because it's been a little while since I've done one of these. The schedule has come out for 2021, and I've gotten to know some of the 49ers draft picks, writing a lot of deep dive feature stories on these guys over the past couple of weeks. So I haven't really been, available to go live, didn't have all that much time. But I want to talk about Trey Sermon today and Ambry Thomas today, and then take all of your questions. But it was a lot of fun to talk to people that know these players that the 49ers drafted in the third round. And I just wanted to relay some of that stuff, especially for those of you who have yet to see some of the articles, because I think these are two really, really interesting fits for the 49ers based on the personalities and the playing styles of both players. I really think that the 49ers front office has learned from some things that didn't necessarily work back when they started this all in 2017. And they have made course corrections. And obviously, Ambry Thomas and Trey Sermon aren't the only course corrections that they've made. But I think that these two players are great examples of course corrections that the 49ers front office has made. And that extends throughout this whole draft class. I think that with the offensive linemen and Aaron Banks and Jalen Moore, you also see course corrections. But my Banks Moore story, that's not coming out for another few days. I'm working hard on that one. The ones that I really wanted to talk about right now are the ones that are already out, and that's Ambry Thomas and Trey Sermon. So, for those of you who haven't seen the pieces yet, I'm sharing them in the chat right now. On The Athletic, we currently have the sale again, $1 a month, which is a hell of a deal. So there's Ambry Thomas. I'll even write it right now, Ambry Thomas. And I will also share the Trey Sermon feature, which was a blast to write. And that's the link in the chat right now. So both let you hop onto The Athletic for $1 a month. And that deal will only last a few more days. So, I mean, these are deep dive features onto two of the 49ers' most exciting draft picks. They took them both in the third round. And with that $1 a month, you'll get all of our stuff on Trey Lance. You'll get all of our stuff on everybody else, Diamador Lenore, Talanoa Hufunga. I mean, this is an exciting draft class, and we're about to, continue writing a lot on these guys. Hi to Peter Lee, another 559 49ers fan. What city, Peter? I'm guessing not Visalia, since you didn't mention the city, but I'm curious to know where you're from. I'm currently, mainly based out of Shaver Lake. I'm not there right now, but especially over the whole year of 2020 and much of 2021, there hasn't been any need to be in the Bay Area proper. But the 559 area code actually used to be, one of those area codes that stretched really far up and down the valley. That went all the way up to Modesto, and I believe even Stockton. It wasn't the 559 back then, though. It was the 209. And then they divided the 209 when I was young into two area codes, into the 209 up north and the 559 down south. 559 will run probably between Madera and Delano. Delano might be 661 already. That's Bakersfield. So yeah, you're from Fresno. Cool. Yeah. So hello to the 559. Hope everybody's doing well back there. I'm not currently back in my home region, but let's talk some Ambry Thomas and some Trey Sermon. Which one should we go first? Let's talk Ambry Thomas first, because I think he is a little less discussed. Everybody's really, really excited about Trey Sermon and his 49ers film and his college film and how it's going to fit with the 49ers. But with Ambry Thomas, you have, in my opinion, the anti-Ahkello Witherspoon. The more people I talk to, the more film that I watched of Ambry Thomas, the more it just struck me that this guy is the total opposite of what Ahkello Witherspoon was as far as background, mental makeup. And let's be 100% blunt, 100% honest here. The reason Ahkello Witherspoon didn't make it past his rookie contract with the 49ers is because he was too soft for them. They wanted more physicality, and they wanted a tougher mental makeup out of Ahkello Witherspoon. They didn't want to ride the roller coaster with him, right? They didn't want him to have a bad game and then fall off the map for 5 games and then come back and be good for 2 games. And that happened in his contract year back in 2020. This last season, you saw Keller Witherspoon really show out in the last 2 games of the season. Well, it was too little too late at that point. The 49ers had already gone through the ups and downs of the Keller Witherspoon. They had already seen that, measurables themselves don't get it done in the NFL, especially at a cornerback position where with all these, passing offenses really proliferating and testing those outside cornerback positions. It's one of those situations where you have to have a thick skin as a cornerback. Even Richard Sherman in his prime would lose reps. Remember the great 49ers Seahawks game in 2013 at Candlestick, the one that the 49ers won on that Frank Gore run. I still remember Anquan Boldin beating Richard Sherman. It's not like you win every single rep as a great cornerback, but the great ones know how to pick themselves up and move on when stuff isn't perfect. And in the case of Ahkello Witherspoon, I think for the 49ers, too often, everything had to line up. The pass rush had to be there. Everything had to be perfect. I mean, you go back to the game against the Miami Dolphins, the Brian Allen disaster cornerback for the 49ers. Ahkello Witherspoon apparently was healthy enough to play because he eventually came into that game, but he wasn't healthy enough to start. I still think that the 49ers weren't too happy about all of that. So they were going for a different breed at cornerback. They really needed to have that dog at cornerback. And when you research Ambry Thomas, those traits, those positive traits that the 49ers desperately wanted to course correct toward are all there. Coolest thing about Ambry Thomas is what he went through in 2019 before he posted his career year in college, because he opted out of the 2020 season due to the coronavirus. And you'll probably understand why if you understand what happened to him health-wise in 2019. But in 2019, Ambry Thomas showed up on film. I mean, that's when his interceptions come. That's when his pass breakups come. Everybody already knew that Ambry Thomas was fast entering that season, because in 2018, he took a kickoff back to the house for Michigan against Notre Dame. He even ran a few plays on offense for Jim Harbaugh at Michigan, because they knew that he was a specialty speed weapon kind of guy. He was capable of doing that. What Ambry Thomas hadn't yet established entering that 2019 season is his status as a premier college cornerback. Well, he ran into some adversity in the summer before that 2019 season. He was diagnosed with colitis, which is inflammation of the colon and the stomach. You can't hold food down. You can't keep your weight. I mean, this was a serious condition when Ambry Thomas was diagnosed with colitis in the summer of 2019. Serious enough that he had to go to the hospital for 34 days, and he lost 35 pounds. Now, keep in mind that he's losing this weight in July of 2019. This is about a month before training camp starts for what would be the most important season of his life. That this would be the season that would ultimately punch his ticket to the NFL. Doctors initially told Ambry Thomas that there was no chance that he was going to play given this adversity in the 2019 season, that he should just pack it up, he should redshirt, that he should, just focus on 2020 at the time. Ambry Thomas would not take that as an option. In fact, the two coaches that I talked to from Michigan about Ambry Thomas, who were very closely involved in his development, were Mike Zordich, who was Michigan's defensive backs coach, and Don Brown, who was Michigan's defensive coordinator. Both of these guys visited Ambry Thomas in the hospital. And I don't know where you would be if you lost 35 pounds and were in the hospital for 34 days, but I certainly wouldn't be working out if I, was struggling to get out of bed. When Mike Zordich and Don Brown both visited this guy, Ambry Thomas, in the hospital, he had somehow snuck out of his hospital room and had found gallon jugs of water, those 2-gallon jugs of water, and was walking up and down the stairs of the hospital using those jugs as weights to try to stay in some kind of shape. And then as soon as the colitis settled down, he ate and ate and ate, trying to get back that weight. He wanted to regain the 35 pounds he lost. Well, fast forward, not even like 3 months or 4 months, fast forward just a month, and Ambry Thomas was back in Michigan's training camp. Remember, he starts the month in the hospital of August because this is stretching out July, kind of August. Then he gets out of the hospital toward the end of July. It might have bled over into August, but I'm not sure. But still, symbolically, by the final day of August, Ambry Thomas is in Michigan's starting lineup, starting cornerback, and he picks off a pass, has a pass breakup, and a tackle for loss in the first game of the season, August 31st, 2019. So this guy goes from losing 35 pounds and doctors telling him he can't play at all in the season to picking off a pass in the season opener for Michigan, and he goes on to have a huge year. Now, obviously, the holdout, or not the, I shouldn't say holdout, it's the wrong word, the opt-out for Ambry Thomas in 2020 threw him off a lot of people's radar. I think that after 2019, you are hearing rumblings about Ambry Thomas being a potential second-round draft pick when he would go pro. But he opted out of the 2020 season, and I think it makes sense why. You see a lot of these guys that had pre-existing health issues opt out of the season in 2020. Well, Ambry Thomas had been coming out of colitis. Coming off of colitis, I think you can understand why. It's definitely not because he didn't love football, and he kind of fell off everybody's radar. He didn't fall off the 49ers radar, and I can tell you with certainty that they were blown away by that hospital story. John Lynch listens a lot, and this is a good thing because Adam Peters knows what he's talking about. John Lynch listens a lot to Adam Peters. Adam Peters is a very, very strong voice inside the 49ers building as the assistant general manager. And Adam Peters was the guy that was on Ambry Thomas from the beginning. He had, researched into the excellent 2019 season that Thomas put on film. He knew about the toughness that he showed through that hospital visit, and he was there championing Ambry Thomas throughout the process, putting his film in front of John Lynch, really pounding the table for the 49ers to draft this guy. So that brought us to the pre-draft process when the 49ers were assembling their final draft board. And John Lynch needed, based on what it sounds like, one more definitive recommendation for Ambry Thomas. He wanted to hear from somebody else too, somebody who knew the player really well, to make sure that he was one of those, premier cornerbacks on the 49ers board. So Adam Peters and John Lynch got on a three-way phone call with Mike Zordich, who, if you remember from the 80s and 1990s, if you're a fan of that era, was a defensive back in the NFL, played some for the Steelers. He played for a few teams in the NFL, but Mike Zordich was John Lynch's contemporary, and John Lynch respects the hell out of Mike Zordich. So when Mike Zordich went and told John Lynch all the stories that I'm telling you right now about Ambry Thomas, about how tough Ambry Thomas is, and when he verified that, the opt-out in 2020 had nothing to do with Ambry Thomas potentially not liking football, when he emphasized Ambry Thomas is a leader and a guy that's going to rally your team, he absolutely loves the game, that's when John Lynch was sold on this defensive back. And all of a sudden, the 49ers were determined that they wanted to draft Ambry Thomas. Now, the funny thing here is that Ambry is a Detroit product, Martin Luther King Jr. High School in Detroit. The Lions had the pick right before the 49ers. And when the Lions came on the clock, the 49ers were a little bit worried that, the Lions would feel the same way as they did about Ambry Thomas. They want that blue collar kind of physical guy, and they would pick the hometown cornerback. It turns out that did not happen, though, and the 49ers could breathe a sigh of relief. The Lions picked Melifonwu, who the 49ers had waived his brother earlier in the day, but the Lions had picked the guy who a lot of 49ers fans wanted, and then the 49ers ended up picking Ambry Thomas, who had fallen off a lot of fans' radar the very next pick. The big plot twist comes through the release of the schedule, right? The 49ers play at Detroit, which is Ambry Thomas's hometown, in week 1 for his career debut of the 2021 season. And not only is that a homecoming for Ambry Thomas, but it's also going to be against the team that passed up on him right before the 49ers picked him. And I can guarantee you that players notice when your hometown team, the team you grew up cheering for, passes up on you for another player at your position, which is exactly what happened when the Lions picked another DB instead of Ambry Thomas. So I think it's really cool that that's all going to come full circle, the 49ers and Lions at week one. So again, Ambry Thomas, that's the first article that I wanted to share with everybody today. And there it is again. You can subscribe for $1 through that link. So let's talk some Ambry Thomas. I'll answer some questions. Do you think the 49ers would have taken Elijah Molden if he wasn't selected 2 picks before? That's a great question. I think the 49ers really liked Elijah Molden, but I think they like Ambry Thomas even more. In fact, I believe that Ambry Thomas, they view him as a second-round talent. I think that the 49ers took advantage and capitalized on the fact that Ambry Thomas slipped toward late in that third round with that second, third round pick of theirs because he opted out of the 2020 season. I think the 49ers saw tremendous value in that. And, a lot of people thought Elijah Molden was a second rounder. I mocked him, the 49ers in the second round, but he slipped a bit. But it must be noted that after that 2019 season, people thought that Ambry Thomas was a second round talent. And the reason that he slipped in the minds of most of these mock drafters and these teams is because he opted out of that 2020 season. And given the fact he had colitis the year before, I don't see anything wrong with that. And I think the 49ers think the same thing. So if they truly did believe that Ambry Thomas had second round capabilities and they're getting him for third round value, I tend to think that they would have picked him over Elijah Molden too. They definitely, based on what John Lynch said, would have picked him over Melifonwu, who was also a guy that some people thought would go higher up in the second round, but went in the third round instead. Any more Ambry Thomas comparisons? I see the Adoree Jackson comparison. Adoree Jackson, obviously the cornerback out of USC. I covered Adoree a little bit in the Pac-10 since in the Pac-12. Pac-10 used to be back in my college days, but then it turned into the Pac-12. And Adoree at USC was just a tremendously talented returner. And I think that Ambry Thomas has, those great return skills as well. There's even a play that Michigan used him on offense, a little jet sweep kind of play in 2018 that I wouldn't put past Kyle Shanahan if the 49ers are ever in a situation where they have some health issues on offense. You don't necessarily want to give Brandon Ayuk that carry. You want him to specialize in some downfield route running. If you just need speed to kind of hit the edge, I think Ambry Thomas could do that. He did that for Harbaugh over at Michigan. At September 12th season opener at Detroit, Michigan is actually hosting Washington, which is funny. That's Elijah Molden's former team on September 11th, the day before the 49ers play the Lions. So if anybody is in that Detroit area, Ann Arbor, that's where the big house is at. That's only about 45 minutes away from Detroit. You can watch Harbaugh coach his team against the Huskies on Saturday, and then you could watch the 49ers take on the Lions in the season opener on Sunday. Could be a fun weekend out there. Yeah, and again, great question. Do you think Ambry Thomas will challenge for the kick returner job? I think he absolutely will challenge for the kick returner job. That's what he did at Michigan. He didn't return punts at Michigan, but he returned kicks, and he did it really well. Just watch the one he took right up the gut there to the house against Notre Dame. Notre Dame's got some good athletes on special teams, and Ambry Thomas ran away from all of them. So this is a guy with some real speed. I think, measurably it's around 4.4, but he's got those good kick return instincts. And I asked him right after the draft, hey, do you think that you could return punts for the 49ers? And Ambry, he was all over it. He embraced it. He said, yeah, I think I could return punts for the 49ers, and I expect to be in the mix for that competition. As we all know, the 49ers need both of those positions filled. They need a kick returner and they need a punt returner. They were very inefficient in both regards last season, and that cost you football games. I mean, the punt return deficiency definitely cost the 49ers some football games. Remember how big of a disaster it was against New Orleans. At the very least, you need somebody who's not going to be turning the ball over back there. But then, you look at it analytically, every yard counts, has a point value on the field. It's been statistically demonstrated that these yards in the middle of the field, and that's where punt return yardage typically comes, those yards matter. Ultimately, those yards matter. And when a team is playing a lot of one-possession games, chances are if you're losing and bleeding a lot of those yards in the middle of the field, and especially on turnovers, because that's a huge yardage reversal, it's probably going to cost you at least one game. And we see what one game can mean. We see what 1 inch can mean when we see the replays of week 19 or week 17. Sorry, week 17 in that 2019 season when Dre Greenlaw made the stop in Seattle. So whenever inch matters, every yard definitely matters. That means that punt returns and kick returns matter. And I think that Ambry Thomas's name is going to be in the mix for both of those. You really need somebody tough back there, because that's the reason why Dante Pettis didn't work out on kick returns or punt returns with the 49ers. In the NFL, you need that blue collar mentality. I think Ambry Thomas and all of the stories surrounding him, that hospital story, all that, I think that really is a big part of it. It's a good one. I really like a Jason Verrett comparison. Both really physical man corners. Yeah, so Michigan ran a lot of press man coverage, and that's the final thing I want to talk about regarding Ambry Thomas here before I move on to Trey Sermon. The man coverage that Michigan ran really entrusted Ambry Thomas out on islands on the outside, and I think that's something that the 49ers schematically will be doing more and more of. We already saw an uptick in it last season, and a lot of it was because Jason Verrett was having such a good year. You could trust that guy on the outside. So I think if you continue trusting your corners, and if Ambry Thomas develops the way the 49ers expect him to, and you still have Verrett there this year, maybe you add somebody else, maybe Diamador Lenore becomes a guy on the outside, although I think that they're thinking of him more as a slot cornerback. But the more you trust your corners, the more you can move to these man coverages. And the good thing is that press man is going to be related to a lot of what happens with the 49ers cover 3 in the zone. The press coverage happens a lot. I think the big, strong, physical corner, and Ambry Thomas has a wingspan of a guy who's 6'2" or 6'3". That's going to be in demand in this scheme. But I think the fact that Ambry Thomas is only 5'11", 6 feet tall, yet still has that wingspan, gives him the agility of a corner that could be much more versatile than just a zone corner. Ran a ton of that man coverage in Michigan, and I think the 49ers can become more multiple defensively with him. That's something I talked a long time about with Don Brown, who was Michigan's former defensive coordinator. He's now at Arizona. He really thinks he studies the 49ers every single offseason, and he sees a defense that's becoming more multiple. They're flexible on the back end. It's not just one coverage anymore. And Ambry Thomas is a corner who can potentially fit that. All right, another question right here. Schedule question: will the team be staying back east between weeks 1 and 2? Yes, the team will be staying in all likelihood back east between weeks 1 and 2. They're already talking about it right now, and both of those games in weeks 1 or 2 are 10 a.m. Pacific time starts, which is the dreaded early body clock start for NFC West or Pacific time teams. So you essentially eliminate, for all intents and purposes, for your jet lag purposes, one of those early body clock starts by staying over on the East Coast for a week in between the games at Detroit and at Philadelphia. So the 49ers, I fully expect to stay back east. They are already making plans in that regard. And then behind the scenes, was the team happy with the schedule despite the long travel on a short week to Tennessee? I think the 49ers are generally happy with the strength of schedule. I think if you look at it, and this is probably part of the fact, a byproduct of the fact they finished 6-10 last year. They're playing teams that don't, at least on paper, look as strong as the year after they won the division in 2019. So, I think it was one of the odds-making sites actually ranked the 49ers schedule based on opponents' predicted record as the easiest schedule in the NFL. I think for those, purposes, the 49ers are happy. I don't think that they're thrilled with all the 10 a.m. starts. Right now, there are 5 10 a.m. starts. And the 49ers actually last saw 5 10 a.m. starts in 2017 when they weren't any good, when the league didn't care at all about them. Now, obviously, the league cares about the 49ers to the point that, they have 5 primetime games. So obviously the NFL is really interested in the 49ers, but they still gave them 5 10 a.m. starts, which back in 2018, after the 2017 season where the 49ers had to do all those 10 a.m. starts. Jed York and the 49ers delegation at the owners' meetings actually lobbied the NFL. They introduced legislation to limit it to a maximum of 10 a.m. starts for West Coast teams. Obviously, the legislation didn't pass because why would East Coast owners vote to give West Coast teams, a competitive break? So it didn't pass, but the 49ers just wanted to get their side of the story out there. And they had, used research and a study, some data that showed that the winning percentage of teams that play in 10 a.m. games goes down from, I think it's 45% is the average winning percentage of road teams in the NFL. Teams that are on the road, that Pacific time teams that start games at 10 a.m. Pacific, their win percentage goes down from that 45% to like 32%, which is a big gap. I mean, that's a 12% gap. We talk about every inch, every yard mattering. Well, if your win probability goes down from 45 to 32% because you're starting at 10 a.m. and you're, physically you're not able to perform at as high of a level due to jet lag, that's a significant thing, right? So the 49ers wanted to change that in 2018. The proposition failed, and now they're stuck again with 5 10 a.m. games. I don't think that they're happy with that. They only had 3 of them last year, but they can essentially eliminate one by staying back east in between 2 of those trips when 2 of those are back-to-back. So for all intents and purposes, the 49ers are going to play 4 games where I would say that it's been demonstrated that their odds of winning are hurt by the fact that their stars